All right. All right. What's up, everybody? Mike Smith here. I think I'm live. I hope I'm live. I'm sure I'm live. And so anyway, I just want to say what's up. My name's Mike Smith, and I'm excited to kick it with you, and I'm excited to be here. Some of you are probably wondering why this slightly homeless looking skateboarder tattooed up dude is talking to you today, and I will get to all of that in a minute. But I just want to say it's good to be here, and I'm really excited that I got an opportunity to share my story and share kind of my journey, and hopefully leave you all with maybe some just thoughts and insights on how to think about your moments at work or even at home. And if you have kids, I'm sure that some of this is going to be applicable for you as parents as well. And so I'm going to kind of hop into my story and just sort of share with you what we call significant moments of impact at Rabble Mill. But I'll kind of catch you up a little bit first. And so I grew up in Nebraska. I graduated high school out in Western Nebraska. And so for all of you that still have a 308 cell phone number, shout out to you. I still rock a 308. And so Imperial's where I grew up, graduated high school with like 42 kids in my class. And I was always a procrastinator. And I don't know if a lot of you are still wired like that. I still am wired like that. Like I'm still just this gigantic procrastinator. But as a kid, I was like the world's worst procrastinator. And so when I turned 18 in April, that was when I kind of had this moment where I was like, oh man, like I need to figure out what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. And I need to figure out like who I'm going to be and where I'm going to go. And maybe I should start applying for colleges, and like, maybe I should do the FAFSA. Maybe I should take the ACT. And so I was kind of a late bloomer. And so my senior year, like right at the end, I kind of decided like, all right, maybe I should figure out what to do for college. And so I walked into my guidance counselor's office, and this is like, a town with no stoplight. There's like 2,000 people in Imperial, 100,000 cows. Like our poor little guidance counselor had no idea what to do with me ever. And I came walking into her office in April and was like, I got it figured out. I was like, I saw this documentary of this dude who jumps out of helicopters and he fights forest fires from the inside. They're called smoke jumpers. I was like, their life looks cool. Like they get to jump out of helicopters. I was like, this is perfect for me. Like, this is what I want to do. And she looked at me and she's like, we don't even have like trees around here. Like there's no forest around here, Mike. She's like, what are you talking about? She was like, that sounds like a great plan B. She was like, let me help you find plan A. And she asked me a question that I often ask young people, but she hit me with not Mike, what do you want to be when you grow up? She was like, who do you want to be? Like, who do you see yourself becoming? And she didn't talk to me about a job. She didn't talk to me about an occupation. She didn't talk to me about how much money I wanted to make, if I was going to be an entrepreneur, if there was going to be some career, like what I was going to do for college. It was none of that. She was just like, who do you see yourself becoming? And I thought about it and I was like, I don't know. And I was like, I guess I really just want to like help people and I want to have fun. And I was like, that's kind of who I am and what I do and what I care about. And so I was like, I think that's what I want to do. And she was like, great, you got to work with kids. And I was just like, cool. And when you grow up in a small town like that, there's like 4 ways you know how to work with kids. You're like a coach, a teacher, a camp counselor, a psychologist, a therapist, or a youth pastor, or like something that works with kids. And so I didn't know what to do. So I just applied for a couple colleges. And when you don't apply until April and you get an 18 on your ACT and you get a C- in every grade for every class you've ever taken, surprise, surprise, you don't really get accepted to that many universities. And I wanted to play basketball. And the only place I got accepted was a bunch of junior colleges across the state. And I was like, all right, I don't want to be on that track. So I snuck into this college, like literally squeaked into this small little school in Wyoming. And I basically made it until Thanksgiving break until I got, how should I say this? I got kicked out. But it wasn't like, it was a very kind kick out of college. I basically just got asked not to come back after Thanksgiving break because me and the dean of men didn't see eye to eye on a lot of different things. And so I got the boot, and it was basically my opportunity to transfer to this other school in Omaha, Grace University, rest in peace, no longer. So I transferred to Grace University because it's the only place that I had even gotten accepted into that would like take me mid-semester. And I show up January in Omaha, a semester late, and I basically started my college journey. And my first day on campus, I get there. And you got to keep in mind, there's like already a basketball team. There's already been practice. There's already culture. There's already like all this stuff. And I show up in January and my coach is the dean of students. Like he's the academic dean and he's the head basketball coach. So this for a guy like me was a terrible situation because it meant that he was going to like actually pay attention to my grades for the next 4 years. And so I was already like annoyed that I was going to have to like be on my stuff because this guy was going to be making me. So I meet this guy and he's like this super stern dude. And he looks at me and he's like, Mike, and he's like, what do you want to get a degree in? What do you want to do? And I was just like, I want to help people and I want to have fun. And he was like, if you want to help people, he was like, get in my truck. And I'm looking at this dude and I'm like, my mom warned me about this dude my entire life. I was like, I'm not getting in this man's truck. but that's your coach. Like, you got to do what coach says. So I hop in this dude's truck, and we drove from where Grace was, like on like 10th and Pine or whatever, to the 10th Street Bridge, like over there, like on 10th Street. And back in 2001, if you're from Omaha and you've been around long enough, you know that that place has changed a lot. So he drove me back in 01 or 02 to 10th Street Bridge. We walked to the top of it, and he pointed over it and was just like, Mike, he's like, if you want to help people, he's like, why don't you help them? And I looked down, and underneath where the railroad tracks were, there was just like tons of homeless people. There was tents. There was just like a community, and there was just a bunch of homeless people down there. I'm looking at this dude, I'm looking at these people, and I'm just like, I'm from Imperial. I'm like, coach, like, I'm 18 years old. Like, what do you expect me to do about that? And he's like, if you're going to help people, he was like, why don't you start with them? So we walked back down the bridge, and then he was like, if you follow this all the way around, you walk all the way around, he's like, you'll find exactly what you're looking for. And he was like, but you're a man now. And he was like, do this one on your own. He just got back in his truck. He drove back to campus. And I walked all the way around, walked underneath that bridge. I put my hand out to the first homeless dude I saw, and I was terrified. I've been in college for like half an hour at this point. I shook this man's hand, and I was just like, my name's Mike. I was like, I go to school right up the hill, and I was just like, what can I do? Like, how can I help? And this dude told me everything. Like, he sat there and he just told me everything. He told me his name and his story and where he was from and what happened to his family. And he was a vet. He served our country. He came back and he just lost everything. And he just like told me his whole life story. And then he was just like, Mike, I just need socks. And I didn't get it. I'm looking at this dude like, what are you talking about socks? Like, why do you need socks of all things? And he took off his boots and he showed me his feet. And what I didn't realize is socks are one of the most requested, least donated things in a homeless shelter. And the average amount of days that a homeless person wears the same pair of socks is for 30 days. Like, I want you to picture that real quick right now. Like, think about the pair of socks you got on right now, whether you're at home or you're in the office or you got slippers on, whatever you're doing. Like, picture like rocking that pair of socks for the next 30 days. And if you're watching this, it means you probably live inside. Like, this was January and this dude didn't live inside. He lived outside, and this dude's feet were destroyed. Like, I couldn't believe what I was looking at as an 18-year-old. And I was just like, socks? Like, you need socks? And it was just in my head. I was like, I can get you socks. So I went back up to campus, and the cool part about playing sports in college is you get free stuff. So I found a box of Adidas tube socks for the girls volleyball team, and I was like, they're free, right? And so I took that box of socks, I walked back under that bridge, and I just made it rain tube socks that day. And all these dudes lined up really politely and just started taking socks. And guys would be like, hey, can I take 2 pair? Like, I know somebody who's laying over there and they're not in line. And I was like, yeah, sure. I don't care. Like, do what you got to do. And I just started giving out socks. And this was something like in 2002, there was no Facebook to put it on. There was no Instagram to tell the story. There was no YouTube channel. There was no Twitter account to go hashtag something. There was none of that. There was just, you did those things because you wanted to do those things. And that's just kind of who I turned into. And that's just kind of what I did. Like, I just found myself finding ways to just help people. And I always tried to make it as fun as I could. And it wasn't like I did it for community service hours, or I did it for a job resume, or I did it to impress somebody, or I've invited a ton of people all the time. Like, I was pretty low key about it. And I just kind of kept doing my thing and finding a way to just like help people and invest in that. And then my senior year rolled around, and I kind of did like the most Mike Smith thing that I could think of, which is I dropped out of college, like a semester shy of graduating with a degree. And the reason that I did it is because there were adventures ahead. Like, I went to school to play basketball in college. I really didn't think I needed a piece of paper to tell me I was qualified to work with young people. And I always thought, you can always go back to college and graduate. Newsflash, sometimes your college closes down and you can't go back and graduate. But when your name's Mike Smith, I can tell people I have like 3 master's degrees from wherever. And like, what are you going to do? Google me? Like, good luck. Go find that out. You can't. So whatever. I didn't graduate from college. But I just kept cruising and I kept doing my thing. And I started just chasing adventures, and I kept chasing helping people. And I would take jobs like working as a summer camp counselor in Yosemite National Park. And then I took jobs helping at the Hope Center, launched a lot of their after school basketball clinics when it first opened, and coaching basketball at like Millard South, and working just with kids in any capacity that I possibly could. And about 11 years ago, I had a job, and I was a social worker here in Lincoln. I worked at Cedars, and I was, like homeless outreach worker, working with homeless runaway teenagers, trying to get them off the street, trying to help them have a shot at a better life. And I was the judge of teen court. And so here's what this meant. It meant if any kid got in trouble, so if you went to, like a diversion or probation, or if your kid got like a minor in possession or trespassing or vandalism or whatever it was, and you wanted it off of your record, you would go to this thing called teen court. And teen court was basically a jury of kids. And all of these kids were kids who had already gotten in trouble. And I would assign them jury duty. And I was the judge of teen court. And so moms and kids would walk in all dressed up and scared. They were already guilty. They'd walk in, they'd tell me their story and how sorry they were, what happened, or why it wasn't their fault or whatever. And I'd listen to these stories with these kids. Then they'd leave and we'd deliberate, and then we'd give this kid a sentence. And for 2 years, I literally listened to kid after kid after kid. walk into this courtroom and tell me their story. And half the time I was trying not to laugh because I was like, oh, I did the same thing when I was your age. I just got away with it. Like, no way. Like, I listened to these kids and I was like, that was a terrible plan. Like, I wouldn't have done it that way. Like, and I'm listening to them tell me their story and I was like, these aren't bad kids. They're just bored kids. And I think a lot of us can relate to growing up. And if you're from Nebraska and you grew up in Nebraska, like, you can relate to being a bored kid. If you grew up in a small town, you know what it's like to drive up and down Main Street in your small town and like flash people to pull over so you can go talk to them, or going out to the lake and like doing the same thing every weekend with the same 10 or 15 people because like there's nothing to do. Well, that was the narrative in Lincoln with all these kids. There's nothing to do. There was nowhere to go. And it hit me in my head and I was like, that's it. Like, that's my thing. And I tell people all the time, I don't know how to tell you what you're going to be passionate about or how to find your thing. And some of you right now, like, maybe the career you have today and the job that you're in right now, like, this is it. Like, this is your thing. Some of you have a tab open right now and you are constantly researching other jobs and you're trying to get out of here and move on and go do something else. Like, I can't tell you what your thing is, but what I can tell you is what it feels like when you catch that thing. Like, when you grab hold of like your thing, the thing that you feel like you were supposed to do, called to do, meant to do, put on this planet to do, it aligns perfectly with your skills, whatever book you read, whatever thing you whatever it is. A lot of people have this like, I'm supposed to do this one thing or this thing. And if that's how you believe and that's what you're looking for, I can't tell you what it is. But what I can tell you is how it feels when you find it. Because for me, what it felt like was I found the solution to this problem that I was cool spending my entire life trying to figure out. Like, I was going to solve this problem in Lincoln or in Nebraska of kids don't have anywhere to go. They need things to do. Like, and I was going to scale it and I was going to do it. And it was just going to be something that I cared about. And I was just going to make it happen. And I kept talking about it and talking about it and talking about it. And it finally got to the point where I was like, I can't take it anymore. I have to do something about this. And for me, it was really simple. I basically just called a meeting with my boss and I was like, I want to open up this youth center. I want to create this place. And, Cedars was a huge organization. And I was like, you guys should, open up a skate park, let me run it and do all this stuff. And of course they said no. I was like 26 years old. Like, why would they say yes to that? Of course they said no. So Cedars is like, we're not going to do this. Mike, we love you. We don't love your idea, was their exact words. And I was like, cool. I quit. And I was like, I'm going to do this. Like, I got to do my thing. And so I just did my thing. And I seriously just Googled how to start a nonprofit. And I printed off a checklist and I did everything that the internet told me to do. I needed to get a board of directors. Cool. I called all my friends' dads who own businesses and was like, you're smart. Like, help me out. Like, I need roofing dudes. So I called construction companies and I was like, I need people to help me build things. Like, I just put together a group of adults that I thought could help me kind of figure out what I was supposed to do. And I just kept moving it forward. We tore down an abandoned barn out by Blair because we found it on Craigslist, and we just ripped down this corn crib, took all the wood and the roof off of it and brought it back to Lincoln and then made it into a skate park. We just got really, really scrappy. And I built the world's first ever nonprofit indoor skate park. And I put it in a mall. And I put it in a mall for this reason. You can't open up, some of your parents, some of your moms, you put this like skate park that no one's ever heard of and you're a 26-year-old kid in some like warehouse that you could afford in like the shady part of town. Like, moms aren't driving down there to drop their kids off late at night. Like, that's not how you could start. And so I wanted to go to a place where everybody would trust it and everybody would learn about it and everybody could see it. And so I put in the one place in Lincoln that I knew everybody knew about and where kids already were, the mall. And I opened the skate park. And to be really honest with you, and this is something that I think a lot of a lot of entrepreneurs or CEOs or speakers or people just aren't really honest about. But my first skate park, it kind of sucked. Like, it really did. Like, on a 1 to 10 scale, I would have given it like a 7 because it was mine. But I bet most skateboarders and a lot of people, like, it was probably in that like 4 to 5 range. Like, it wasn't that well built. It wasn't like, it wasn't my best, but it was my first skate park. And this was something that caused me to realize something about when you shoot your shot and when you go for it and when you try to do something different or you try to innovate or you try to create something significant. For some of you, that's what you're trying to do. You're in your department or you're a leader at your organization or you're the CEO or the whoever, and you're in charge of something and you want to do things different and you want to change things. And you run into this like, what do you want to call it? You run into this like almost brick wall of humanity. And here's what I realized is when I opened the doors to the skate park, like, I'll never forget the first day, like, unlocked it, slid open that door. There was a line out, down the mall around the corner. And like, all these kids came flying in and signing waivers. And I was like, we did it. And it was like, you're helping kids, you're doing the thing you want to do. And that was like one experience. But there was this very other experience where like people just hated on it, and people didn't believe in it, and people didn't understand it, and people didn't care about it, and people didn't get me. People like didn't understand my intentions and why I did it. And it was really hard for me at first to do what I call now, which is like being the loudest voice in your head. And if you're going to create something significant, like if you're going to do something different, you have to learn how to be the loudest voice in your head. And you can't listen to all the negativity around you. You can't listen to people tell you it's not going to work. You can't listen to people tell you that they're not willing to try. You can't listen to that negative person in the office who never has anything positive to say. It's always something negative. Like, you got to find a way to tune out the negativity and learn how to be what I call the loudest voice in your head. And here's a pretty good like litmus test for if you're not the loudest voice in your head. The litmus test is if when you're in the shower, if it's like 5% washing, 5% singing, and 90% winning fake arguments with people you don't like, you're not the loudest voice in your head. And some of you waste a lot of your drive time, a lot of your commute time, a lot of your shower time, winning these arguments with like a coworker or a past relationship or a family member or someone in your life, but they're not actually there. They're just in your head, and they're taking up a lot of space rent-free. A lot of you want to innovate and want to create big things, and the minute you put your idea out there or you start to creep in that direction and start to take some sort of action, you run into these like adversarial conversations with people who don't care about your idea or aren't as excited as you are, or don't believe in it like you do. And for a lot of you, that's where you stop. Like, it just stops right there. Like, that's just where you just shut it off and you shut it down because you haven't learned how to be that loudest voice in your head yet. And it took me a while. It took me probably a couple years to learn how to tune out like the facts from the feelings of criticism, you know? Like, some of us love criticism, some of us hate it. And like, I like to win, and I hate to lose. I'm not like a guy that like, I don't care about winning, actually. I just like don't like losing. And so for me, criticism was one of those, like, it felt like losing. And so I had a hard time listening to it at first. But once I realized there was a lot of truth in it, there was a lot of honesty in it, and I needed to pull the facts from the feelings, I kind of learned how to become the loudest voice in my head. And most of innovation and most of doing something that no one has seen before means you're going first. Somebody asked me what it feels like running this organization and like doing all the things that I was doing. And I tried to describe it to them where I was like, I feel like I like built this really long train car, and I'm in the front of the train. And sometimes the railroad tracks, it's all good, everything's great. But sometimes like there's no railroad tracks and you're going 100 miles an hour. So you just like plow through a forest and take down a bunch of trees, and you just get like your teeth kicked in for like a couple months or a couple years. And then all of a sudden there's a path again, and you hop back on the tracks and you turn around and there's like 10 more cars attached to the thing that you were building. Like, yeah, you're a little beat up, but you're smarter and you learned a lot along the way. And like, that's what innovation and doing something differently feels like. There are these seasons where there is no path. There is no track in front of you. No one's ever done it before. You can't go Google someone else's version to copy and make 10% different because you're doing something truly new for the first time. And when you do that, the conversation in your head, that's the one that matters the most, because that's where, I don't know, that's where most of the biggest decisions got made for me. And that's where a lot of the feedback and criticism, and that was where I was able to just kind of keep moving forward. And so for the first couple of years, one of the hardest lessons I learned as I was like the dude who had something that no one had ever done before was tuning out like the negativity and learning how to have a better conversation in my own head. And once I did that, I'm telling you, I went, and it was like I put these blinders on and we just kept creating. We just kept going. And so we moved our space out of the mall. And the reason we moved out of the mall was simple. I couldn't be open late enough. Kids get in trouble between 9 and midnight. They need a place to go on weekends. And the mall wouldn't let me stay open that late. So I needed a new place to go. So we got into this new space, and we opened up this new skate park, and it's like a skate park and a coffee shop and a concert venue and a community art space. And it's home to, hundreds of kids that get free food and meals weekly, and they get skateboards and helmets. And we have like an incredible community inside this space that we call the Bay, and we call it home to the misfits. And it's this like place that just means everything. And it's here in Lincoln. And one of the cool things that we did from the Bay was I started skating around giving out socks and beanies and bottles of water to the homeless here in Lincoln, because I was a social worker. It was an awesome way to have an impact on our community. And it was really easy to do. And it was what I had been doing in college, and I just kind of kept doing it. Now I just skated around. And kids, once I opened up the skate park, there'd be kids skating downtown, and they'd see me like skate by and like go give a homeless dude like a hygiene pack or whatever and talk with them for a bit. And then they'd be like, yo, what are you doing? And they'd come over and I'd be like, oh, I'm just doing this thing where I skate around. And they'd ask like, can we come skate with you? I was like, yeah, of course. Like, I'll meet you on Sunday. Like, bring a bunch of stuff. Like, meet me here. And it went from like 5 kids to 10 kids to 30 kids to 40 kids. And all of a sudden you got like 40 skateboarders, like skating down the street. Like a few skateboards on the sidewalk is annoying. 40 skateboarders on the sidewalk, that's like a situation. Like, it's like a full blown thing. And so you got these kids just like skating down the street and everybody's like, what the hell is going on? And then everybody stops and like sits down and pulls up to a homeless person, and someone pulls out their backpack and just gives them a hygiene kit. And we would just have a conversation. It was this really cool organic thing that we started in Lincoln 10 years ago, and it exploded. It exploded to kids all around the world. I would travel and speak and talk and host these festivals and conferences, and kids would hear about Skate for Change and be like, can I do this in my town? And I was like, you don't need my permission to give socks to homeless people. You just needed the idea and the thought. So kids just started skating, and, you know, Skate for Change literally grew from like this little thing we did here in Lincoln on the streets to hundreds of chapters, and we've given out millions of socks over our 10 years. And it was a really fun, easy, organic thing that we didn't overcomplicate, and we just made it really simple. I always said it was so simple that a skateboarder could do it. And so we just made it really simple to understand. You get socks, you skate, and you give socks. It was really easy. And we just kind of scaled it and grew it. And honestly, like the things that we were doing and the track that we were on, everything was working, and we were like on this path and on this trajectory of like, you know, we're doing these incredible things. Skate for Change is really growing. Rabble Mill had just been created, and we merged Here Nebraska, which was, you know, original Nebraska music being told on a bunch of different platforms and mediums. And we merged that organization. Andy Norman's from Omaha and Here Nebraska founder. He's my best friend. We grew up in Imperial together. And in 2018, we merged Skate for Change, the Bay, and Here in Nebraska to form Rabble Mill, and that's our organization today. And so, you know, everything was awesome. 2018, we were like learning how to be co-founders, merging our organization. 2019, we were focused on operational excellence, and we were like, 2020 is the year. And I was like literally flying home from a tour stop, and it was like March 13th, and all of a sudden, Mr. Rogers gets coronavirus. Tom Hanks gets coronavirus. It's the same person, in case you didn't know. The NBA gets shut down. Like the whole thing goes down. It was just like bang, and your world stops. And like my job was to pack as many kids into a skate park or an all-age concert venue and to have these like, you know, really intimate experiences in this space. Or it was to fill, you know, auditoriums with hundreds of, you know, thousands of kids from hundreds of schools from all across the state or a region or a district. Like I literally was like a super spreader just everywhere I went. Like that would have been my thing. I was like the most canceled. Like you don't get more canceled than filling arenas full of high school kids from all across the state and then letting them hang out with each other for a couple hours and then sending them back home. Like what I did, gone. Like it was the most canceled. And so we just had to pivot. Like all of you watching this, we had to pivot. And when you're a place, like a physical place, like an after school place that kids go and a place that kids come to, and that gets taken away, like you have to pivot. But it's not as easy as just being like, well, head to Zoom and we'll just start, like, just make sure you're like, have a room at your house that you can do this in. Like kids lost skateboarding, kids lost their community, kids lost the place that they would go from Saturday morning when they woke up until Saturday night until we closed. And kids lost the place where they had their friendships and their passion and their purpose. And to a lot of our kids, their identity is skateboarding. Their identity is musician. Their identity is being a creative. And so when that got taken away, our team really got together and we were like, wait a minute. We were like, kids are going to lose school. They're going to lose moments. They're going to lose, you know, games, proms, dances. And to me, and maybe this is like, I'm a 7 on the Enneagram. So any of you out there that have done the Enneagram, like I'm a 7 all the way. And if you haven't done the Enneagram, you should do the Enneagram. It's really helpful. It helped me a lot. And the Enneagram at work was huge for our organization. So you should definitely check it out. But the 7 in me was like the like professional Peter Pan in me was like, kids can't lose fun. Like there's just no way. Like kids are not going to lose fun. We're not going to let that happen. So we were like, well, how do you do it? Like, how do you continue to create impact when you can't be in the same place? How do you continue to make a difference when we're all stuck on like a box in the screen like this and kids are going to all get sent to their room and we're not going to have access to them? Some of our kids didn't even have a computer or internet at home. So we were like, how are we even going to find these kids? Like, what are we going to do? And we got together as a crew and we created and we really formalized a few thoughts. And one of those is this idea around significant moments of impact. And I'm going to come back to that in a second. But we as a nonprofit, you have to do KPIs all the time. I don't know if there's anything more annoying on the planet as a nonprofit than like the conversation around KPIs. Like it's literally terrible because our KPIs would be things like how many homeless youth were in your skate park after 9:30. And it's like, so I have to ask my staff, hey, can you identify how many homeless kids are in the skate park after 9:30? So what are they supposed to do? Get their clipboard out and be like, no, they got a home. Well, I don't know if they're home. Hey, are you? Like, no. we're not, that's like the least dignifying way to categorize somebody, is like, are they homeless or not? Are they poor or not? Are they this or not? And it was all negative. And I hated KPIs, and our group hated it too. So we created our own system. We just called them significant moments of impact. We called them SMIs. And we just tied them back to our core values. And we were like, what moments are significant for us? What moments are impactful? We tied them back to our core values. We tied them into the social emotional learning that we know is important for young person's development and growth, like moments where they find confidence, moments where they have a restorative justice, like a kid steals a skateboard, and instead of kicking them out and, pushing them away, we pull them in closer, and we're like, okay, you stole a skateboard. How do we make this right? How do we bring you closer as a family? How do we, you must need something. How do we bring you into the community, not push you out of the community? Because that's where impact is found. And so we identified what we would call our significant moments of impact, and we tied them to our core values. And our core values are so dope. Like, I brag about our core values all the time because they're awesome. And if your organization's core values are lame, corny, cheesy words that nobody says anymore, what are you doing? Like, if when the pandemic hit, if you didn't actually look at your core values as a way to sort of navigate what you were doing next, what is the point of your core values? No one at your company even cares. You did it as a C-level group because you felt like you had to, and maybe you're passionate about it. But if you can't talk to your team and be like, what are our core values and how do they impact your job? Either get rid of your core values or get new ones. And so our core values are really simple. Our first core value is dream differently. Like, if you come to us with well, this is the way we've always done it before, it's like the quickest way to light my fuse and just get me so upset. Like, I'm not interested in that conversation. Another core value we have is focus on solutions, not problems. Identify the problems. Tell us what's going on, but come to us with a solution on how it can get better. Honoring relationships is another core value. We're big on not having a toxic work environment where people gossip about each other, people are negative with each other. We just don't tolerate it. And so honoring relationships is a huge part for us, and we hold people to that. Celebrating each other. I think a culture of celebration is something that is massive for an organization. If you don't have a way to internally celebrate each other and highlight the good things that you're doing, a lot of times people don't think they're doing good things. And the only time people get emails is when it's negative. It's rarely this like influx of positivity. So celebrating each other is a massive moment for us. And we wanted to create a culture of celebration for our kids. One of our core values that I love more than anything is make it fun. Like, we have a core value literally called make it fun. And so we've got to dream differently. We have to focus on solutions, not problems. We have to honor relationships. We have to make it fun. So the pandemic hits and all these kids go home, and we were like, all right, like, how do you do it? Like, how do you still bring these significant moments of impact to young people? And we have lots of young people. So we're like, how do you scale it? And at a tech company, you're always thinking stuff like that. Like, how do you scale it? How do you make it bigger? Like, how do we grow it? And when, I've got a video show or content that I create for high school kids, and 10 million kids a week watch this show all around the world. Like, how did I scale tour stops? How are we going to scale Skate for Change? Like, I very much am always like, how do you create something that's scalable and a model that you can grow? But when the pandemic hit, it was like, what do we do? Like, how do we do this? And it literally, I was so proud of our team. It took about all of 2 weeks for us to like come up with a concept, whip it into shape, and execute it. And by honestly, like April 1 of last year, when the pandemic hit and people were like, what do? We just started to execute, and we executed a really fun, really easy plan. And what we did is we focused on moments. Like, we didn't focus on the masses anymore because we couldn't reach them at scale. We couldn't do it like that. So we had to focus on moments, small, significant, important moments. And so what we chose to do is we went to this platform called Flipgrid, because it's a video, like, you can make a video, send a video back, and it allows for like a rolling conversation, and is really safe because education uses it. So we took our skateboarding artists and our music artists and our digital creative artists, and we sent them all to Flipgrid, and we were like, make these sort of like challenges and lessons and all these videos, and challenge kids to do something. And when they send us a video back in, we're going to reward them with something positive. And so, and a great example of this is we have a big flatbed trailer, and we turned it into a mini like half pipe. So it's a little mini ramp. So it's like a little baby half pipe on this 19-foot long, 12-foot wide, I think it's a 10-foot wide trailer that we built. And so we literally can hook this ramp up to a truck. And so what we would do is we would send out a video like we would do the hippie jump. A hippie jump is where you set up like 2 bricks and then like a broom handle across it, or a broom across it. And you roll towards it, and then you let your skateboard roll under the broom handle. You jump over the broom handle, land back on your skateboard, and roll away. They call that a hippie jump. I have no idea why they call it a hippie jump. Maybe a hippie was the first person to do it, and so it got called the hippie jump. No clue. But we put out a challenge called the hippie jump. And so all these kids start sending in these videos where like kids are jumping over their neighbors, and kids are jumping over their sisters, and like these crazy videos are coming back in our way. And we would pick some kid that won, or some kid that did something creative, or some kid that tried really, really hard, or send in a ton of videos of them failing and then finally getting it. We would just pick a kid that we were like, they need this moment. And we would hook up this ramp, we drive it over to their house, and we would leave this gigantic skate ramp at their house for 24 hours and let these kids just skate it and have their moment with it. And you would have these moms hit us up and be like, this was the best day of my kid's life in the middle of a pandemic. Like parents were like, this is like unbelievable that they got to do this. We can't believe you would do this for us. We'd leave it, we'd clean it off and wipe it down and take it to the next spot. And we just continued this narrative throughout the pandemic of saying, okay, cool, we can't make impact at this massive scale. So let's have a massive impact, one moment, one kid, one person, one opportunity at a time. And we just kept chipping away at it. And we just kept doing that. And because of that, we were able to scale our online programming. And so we went from working with kids just in Lincoln, which is typically what we do. We've got a couple hundred kids in Lincoln that we work with on a regular basis, to all of a sudden, we're able to put our programming out there for the entire state of Nebraska. So we've got kids in Oakland Craig learning how to skateboard, kids in Broken Bow, kids outside of Scotts Bluff, kids in Lexington, kids in Schuyler and South Sioux City, and kids in like all across the state of Nebraska. Kids are skateboarding, kids are learning how to do beat making and make digital skills. Kids are learning how to do photography and videography and stop motion, and they're connecting with our online teaching artists. And for some of our, for some of these kids, like this was the first time they ever had a video or a teacher of color. This was the first time that they ever had a person in the LGBTQ plus community interact with them from a teaching perspective. Like we were literally giving kids experiences that they don't typically get in their small town. And I know because I grew up in these small towns and I get it. And we just focused on one kid, one moment, one video, one reply, one opportunity. And we did it using this, what I'm going to call it a compliments training. And this is something that I had to do when I was a kid. And I'm going to share this with you. And if you're a parent right now, and if you're if you're a person who is an introvert and you struggle sometimes with how to interact or with how to compliment someone or how to celebrate someone or how to engage in a conversation, or maybe COVID really stuck you into some socially isolated box and you only know how to be on Zoom now. And like when you get back around people, you're worried you're going to be like the weird one or whatever. I'm going to give you like an actual tactical tip. This is a training that we do with our staff. And this is something that they've gone through. This is something they're familiar with. And this is something that is so helpful. And I learned this when I was a kid. So I mentioned earlier that I worked, and this is in our videos. Like I want to explain like the videos. We'd send a video to a kid. They'd send a video back. Our staff would use this type of engagement, this depth of engagement that I'm going to show you in a moment. They would use these in these videos to get kids to continue to interact and send in another video and continue to deepen the relationship and deepen the conversation. And so when I worked at this camp out in Yosemite National Park, it was like $3,000 or something to send your kids there. So it was like 2 weeks long. And a lot of this was like really wealthy Orange County, families would like drop their kids off for 2 weeks in the mountains, go on some vacation to Greece or something like that, and like let their kids get toughened up in the mountains with this like camp experience. And then there was this one session of camp that was all kids from like inner city LA, inner city San Diego, and they would come up to this camp. And like that was the week that like everybody loved the most. But it was just like a very interesting dynamic at this camp. But we had to be incredibly trained because you're like backpacking with kids. You're teaching kids skateboarding. You're teaching kids wakeboarding. You're in the mountains for like 3 or 4 nights with kids. So like you literally had to be trained like you can't believe. And one of the trainings we did was this compliments training. And we do this with our staff. And it basically works like this. This training, the CEO or whatever the camp goes up there and he's like, there's 3 levels to compliments. And he's really stern dude. He was like, level 1 compliment looks like this. And for a lot of adults, like when you don't know how to interact with a kid, this is what you do. It happens to me all the time. A level 1 compliment is where you compliment or you engage with like an exterior thing. And so a lot of you will look at a kid and be like, cool hat, nice shoes, I like your hair. For me, I get the same thing all the time. People are always like, sick tats, cool tats, bro. Like I get it all the time. And like, that's what people say. So that's a level 1 compliment. So our camp counselor goes up there and he'll pull someone up and he'll be like, hey, cool hat. Hey, I like your hair. And he's like, that's a level 1 compliment. He's like, those aren't allowed at camp. Like we just don't do level 1 compliments. He's like, they're lazy, they're superficial, and it doesn't typically drive a conversation or a relationship. Most of the time, the only thing a kid can say back is, thanks. Someone says sick tats to me, what am I supposed to say? Like, hey, thank you. I appreciate that. Like they're not all sick. A couple of them are terrible. But anyway, people don't know how to engage. So people do a level 1 compliment. So level 1 is when you compliment the exterior. There's something on the exterior. A level 2 compliment is when you compliment like the action or the effort that it takes. And so let's say you're trying to talk to a young kid and they've got crazy hair, right? And it's your own kid and you're not even sure how to engage your own kid because they watch anime, they game, they're into things that you've never been into because they're growing up 3 generations away, it feels like, from what you did. And you're like, how do I talk to this kid? Instead of saying like, hey, cool hair, what you can say is like, oh, I like that you put blue in your hair. That probably took a long time to do. It looks really good. Like, good job being dedicated and committed to getting your hair to look like look like that. It takes effort, and it's cool to see you put in that much effort because you care about it. Like, that's awesome. That's a whole different compliment than cool hair. And a kid now is like, man, they complimented my effort and how much time it took. And it did take time. And they're like, it did take time. Thank you. Or like, oh, it took like 6, like, and now you can have a conversation off that. That's a level 2 compliment. And then a level 3 compliment is when you compliment the intentions behind why they did something. And so we were going to use this hair analogy. Instead of saying cool hair, you could be like, wow, I really like the color of your hair. It took a long time for you to do that, I bet. I think it's really cool that you're not afraid to put yourself out there and be as unique as you want to be, and just like be as colorful as you want to be. It's really inspiring, and I love that you did that. And like, thanks for being you. That's a very different compliment with someone, and that kid will remember that engagement more than cool hair. I would remember someone coming up being like, man, all those tattoos have words on it. They must mean something. It's cool that you love to put words that are meaningful to you all over yourself. Like, if somebody would have taken the time to like notice the effort and the time and the kind of tattoos a person has, that's a memorable way to start a conversation. And so with our staff, we were just like, hey, we're going to focus on level 2 and level 3 engagement. So it's not about like, hey, great kickflip. It's like, man, I can tell that it took you 8 hours to land that kickflip. Way to go. Great stick-to-itiveness. Way to have the grit to keep trying something. I also saw you in the background celebrating someone else when they landed their kickflip. Way to be a good friend. Like, thank you so much for like your character and for caring about people around you. It's awesome to see that. Our staff were just instinctively being able to have these conversations with kids like that. And the proof was in the pudding. The engagement showed. There are kids all across the state of Nebraska right now in towns where you can hardly skate on the streets because they're basically gravel, that have a skateboard, that are learning how to skate, that love our skate instructors, because the conversation was meaningful and it was significant and it was important. And I think the more that Rabble Mill has grown, and I want to mention this because I know I only have like 4 minutes left, the more that Rabble Mill has grown, the more that we've done things, we've realized, yeah, scaling's awesome. Growing something huge is really cool and still the goal. But the way that you get there is by paying attention to the moments. And the more intentional you are with your moments that you deem significant at your company, I think the better your company culture is going to be, the more you're going to love where you work, the bigger impact you personally can have on the culture of your workspace or your team or your community or your home or your church or the softball team you're on or the poker league you're in. I don't care what you do. Like, whatever you're into, if you thought, what moments matter to me? What are significant moments in my life? And how can I have a level 2 or level 3 kind of intimacy with those things? I really think that's where impact lives. And I think that's where a lot of us want our relationships and our companies and our interactions and ourselves to be, is in these moments that are significant. And so I would say to all of you watching this, is you're thinking about, how do you make a difference or change the world or do what you're doing where you're at, or how do you continue to thrive or just have an impact in general? To me, it always boils down to what moments to you specifically and personally are significant. And I would just identify those. I would track those. I would pay attention to those. I wouldn't forget about those. I would make those public. I would make those values. I would make those things that matter to you, because then you have a way of starting to like walk towards something or move your energy or your thoughts in a direction that you know is going to work and you know is going to be positive. And so for our organization, significant moments of impacts changed our company culture. It's changed the way we do social work. It's changed the way we interact with kids and moms and parents and families and partners. It's honestly shaped me personally. It's been a big thing for me in 2020 was really thinking about what are the significant moments of impact in my life, and am I being intentional about those? And one thing that we're really intentional about, and I only have 2 minutes now, is the Bay in Lincoln. And if you haven't seen this, you can go to thebay.org/Bay High. But the Bay in Lincoln, we're turning it into a focus program. It's going to be a public high school in partnership with Lincoln Public Schools. So Bay High is starting in fall of 2022. So from no college degree to starting your own public high school. Who would have thought? But it's going to be incredible. And we have this amazing partnership with Lincoln Public Schools forged, where we're creating this space for kids that now their education can happen. Kids used to skip school to come to the Bay and hang out, and now they just get to go to school at Bay High. And it's a pretty incredible thing. And I want to say this because it's incredibly important. Bay High was like a really big box to check, but the box right underneath that for us is Bay Omaha. And that's really where we're trying to grow to next, is how do we scale what we do so we can create after school moments all across Omaha, and how do we scale it all across the state of Nebraska? And so I really hope that this is the first of many times that you see Rabble Mill and see the Bay and hear about the work that we're doing, because we're trying to bring these significant moments of impact to Omaha. We want to create a space and a warehouse and do the exact same thing that we did in Lincoln in Omaha. And it's going to take an entire community of people like you to believe in people like us so that we can continue to try to make the impact that we want to make. But, for us, as we scale to Omaha and as we grow and as we try to get there and you start to think about what are the strategies behind how you're going to do these things, we just went back to our core values, and we went back to our SMIs, and we went back to the things that we had always done. And it's not really that complicated for us. We're going to come to Omaha. We're going to create significant moments of impact. We're going to make sure that there's a layer of intimacy and depth with those conversations and those interactions. And typically the rest takes care of itself. And so I think my hope for all of you is, if you can take anything away from just my whatever story, is that you can be a regular, normal, just everyday person. I feel like I am. My name is Mike Smith, for God's sakes. Like, how average is that? Like, I feel like the most average dude of all time, but I found a way to make an impact, and I found a way to find my little spot in this town where I can create a difference and I can do something that matters. And I don't think I'm that smart, and I really don't think I'm that special. And so I would challenge all of you, whether it's the place you work now or the tabs you have open that you're applying for, or it's the communities that you're a part of outside of work. What are the significant moments of impact in your life? What are the things that you want to accomplish? As COVID, this rubber band's getting pulled back, and when we finally get released back into whatever the new world looks like moving forward, we're all going to have to sort of decide, like, who are we next and what direction are we growing into? And so I guess I would ask you the same question my guidance counselor asked me when I turned 18. And it's, who do you want to be when you grow up? And what kind of moments are you trying to have? And I hope all of you watching this are thinking about the moments that you want to have with your kids or your family or your spouse or your neighborhood or whoever. And I hope you find a way to simplify those and really chip away at it. And I do think that's where growth is. And I do think that's where impact is. And so that's my little spiel. That's all I got for you today. But yeah, I really appreciate you just listening to my story. And yeah, I appreciate you hanging in there. Check out rabblemill.org or thebay.org/Bay High, and you can kind of see some of the cool stuff that we're into. I love answering questions. And so if any of you have a question for me, you can find my email on those websites. You can just hit me up on Instagram. It's Mike Smith Live. I'm pretty easy to find. But I just want to say thanks so much for having me out. Thanks for letting me be a part of your conference. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Have a good weekend, everyone. Thanks so much.